You know, when we think about justice, we think about evidence, laws, and courts. But what if the most important thing is the words themselves? What happens when the very language used to convict someone is so vague it's almost meaningless? Well, today we're going to dive into a wild legal case, and we're going to unpack it using the tools of philosophy to see how justice can hang on a single, clear sentence.
So let's start with a question that honestly should give us all pause in this day and age. Can you actually go to prison for forwarding a tweet? It sounds hypothetical, right? But for one scholar, this became shockingly real, and the answer is at the heart of this entire story.
All right, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the scholar and his so-called crime. Then we'll look at the official charges and his brilliant counter-argument. After that, we're going to break out our philosophical toolkit with Bertrand Russell and Gottlob Frege to really dissect the language. And finally, we'll tie it all together to talk about what this means for justice and truth.
Okay, let's get into it. Meet Dr. Qin Jinyuan. He's a scholar, a PhD, and he's the guy who found himself tangled up in a pretty mind-bending legal fight, all because of some stuff he did online.
So what did he do? He forwarded tweets. Some were academic, some were political cartoons, some were news. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. His account had less than 100 followers. We're talking practically zero engagement. And for that, he was hit with this incredibly vague charge, picking quarrels and provoking trouble. And you won't believe it, but they found him guilty. The sentence? 20 months. 20 months in prison. I mean, that just stops you in your tracks. How on earth does an action with almost no impact lead to a consequence that severe? To figure that out, we have to look at how the state actually built their case. All right, so how did the prosecution manage to turn a few retweets into nearly 2 years of prison time? Their whole argument was built on two key claims in the official indictment. First up, the foundation of their entire case, the accusation that he was spreading false information. The idea was that the stuff he was sharing was just plain wrong.
And here's the second piece, the real kicker. They claimed this false information wasn't harmless. No, they said it caused serious chaos in the public order. That's the link they needed to make the crime a serious one.
Okay, so let's trace their logic, because this is where it gets wild. The argument went something like this. 1. Dr. Chen shared stuff. 2. We, the state, say that stuff is false. 3. Because he has a PhD, he's a smart guy, so he should have known it was false. And therefore, his actions weren't just a mistake, they were a deliberate attempt to cause chaos. That's the chain of reasoning that led to a guilty verdict, which, by the way, was upheld on appeal without even a public hearing.
But from inside a prison cell, Dr. Chen didn't just plead his innocence. He fought back with the one weapon he had left, pure logic. He wrote this incredibly sharp deconstruction of the entire case against him. His approach was just brilliant. He systematically took every tweet they used against him and sorted them into 4 categories. He pointed out that things like cartoons and symbols, those are art. Expressions of feeling, those are subjective. Opinions and academic ideas, that's just debate. None of those can be true or false in a courtroom. That left only one tiny group of posts, objective descriptions that could even possibly be fact-checked. And then he went for the core of their argument. He basically said, hold on a second, is it really the job of every citizen to become a professional fact-checker for everything they see online? He argued that we don't have the legal duty or even the ability to do that. If there are rumors spreading, that's a job for the state to handle, not a reason to imprison citizens.
Now, to really understand what's at stake here, we need to pull out our first philosophical tool. And it comes from the legendary logician Bertrand Russell.
So Russell was obsessed with clarity. He had this idea called logical atomism, which sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's the belief that for any big, complex statement to actually mean something, you have to be able to break it down into tiny, simple, provable facts. He called them atomic facts. If you can't, the statement might just be hot air.
So let's apply Russell's idea to that charge, picking quarrels and provoking trouble. A philosopher like Russell would just tear that apart. He'd ask, okay, show me the atomic facts. Who quarreled? What specific trouble was provoked? Where is the evidence? Without those concrete details, the charge isn't really a description of a crime. It's just a powerful, vague phrase that you can't argue against logically.
Okay, time for tool number 2. Let's bring in another giant of logic, Gottlob Frege, who is just as fanatical about being precise with language.
Frege gave us this really useful distinction between sense and reference. Think of it this way. Sense is the idea a phrase gives you in your head, but reference is the actual, real-world thing it points to.
whether it's objectively true or false. For justice to work, Frege would say you need a clear reference to the truth. And this brings us to an absolutely mind-blowing statement, supposedly from the prosecutor in the case. I think it's a rumor, so it's a rumor. I don't plan to verify it. I mean, wow. Through Frege's lens, this is a giant red flag. The prosecutor is saying, I'm sticking with my own sense, my personal belief, and I'm completely ignoring the need for a reference. What's actually true. So Frege's philosophy gives us the exact names for the logical mistakes being made here. First, there's psychologism. That's when you mix up your personal feelings with objective reality, like saying, I feel like it's a rumor, so it is one. Then there's a category error. That's treating things like art or opinions as if they can be fact-checked. And finally, the big one, a total confusion of sense and reference. You're using a vague idea, picking quarrels, to deliver a concrete, objective verdict, guilty.
Okay, so what does this all boil down to? It all leads to this massive collision, a clash between two totally different ways of using words.
Look, this case is so much bigger than one man and his Twitter account. It's a showdown between two worldviews. On one side, you have the language of power, which loves vague, flexible terms that can mean whatever you need them to mean. And on the other side, you have the language of logic, which demands precision, clarity, and a real connection to the facts. And Bertrand Russell himself just nailed the stakes here with this quote. It really forces us to ask a tough question. What kind of society do we want? One where people are free to speak, to question, even to be wrong? Or one where everyone is just too afraid to say anything at all?
In the end, Dr. Chen's story isn't really about tweets. It's about the words we build our entire legal system on, the words for crime, for innocence, for truth itself. And it leaves us with one last, big question to chew on. When the language of justice becomes blurry and unclear, what does that really say about justice itself?